Proper and improper inventory planning can make or break growth marketing and can make or break your finances. The biggest and most frequent issue that we see is brands not consulting the marketing team on the SKU-level demand forecast.
Can I afford this? How am I financing this? What are the risks associated with this? How confident am I in the demand plan? The multi kind of department communication in this process, I think, is what gets missed.
A lot of this is more about communication and alignment than it is about data science. Dylan, what's happening? We're back, man.
We're talking about everyone's favorite topic. I know people, they dream about it at night. They talk about it with their friends and family. How to plan
over dinner, date night with their wife.
Oh yeah. The wives love it. Their favorite
Yeah. Inventory planning, baby. So yeah, what we're talking about today, we're just going to go step by step. This is how you should do your inventory planning. Before we get started, just want to set the stage. This topic is near and dear to our hearts because with Dylan and Aplo Group being in the growth marketing world and To Grow CFO being in the finance world of the ecom ecosystem, proper and improper inventory planning can make or break growth marketing and can make or break your finances. It touches all three of your financial statements and it touches multiple facets of your growth capabilities and the profitability of your growth on the marketing side. So excited to run through this, share some of our thoughts on best practices, and hope it's helpful to apply to your brand. So to just dive right in, Dylan, what is the first step that a brand should do when it's time to do their inventory planning?
I'd say that the workflow probably begins at the demand plan level, which in my opinion should live with the marketing team. And essentially what that looks like is having some base case expectation in this is like the simplest form. I think over the next XYZ number of months based off of what your lead times are, I am going to go and do this much volume. And then you're basically doing what is called a product mix. So I think that X% is going to be this category of this product, X% is going to be this category of product, so on and so forth. And that serves as what you expect to sell through by SKU. That's step one. Step two is maybe where it has to get more collaborative, but can I afford this? How am I financing this? What are the risks associated with this? How confident am I in the demand plan? Should I overbuy to have more buffer? Can I afford that? Should I go back to the marketing team and say, hey, listen, I think this is a good forecast, but it's a little bit risky given our balance sheet. Let's go down 10, 20%. Are we happy with the outcome if that occurs? The multi kind of department communication in this process, I think, is what gets missed. And I think it's partially because in every single organization, there tends to be like a Facebook ad person, a finance person, and they kind of report to various departments as an example. However, for inventory, sometimes that person's the founder. Sometimes it's actual inventory planner. Like that role is so often different types of people in the org. And there's a lot of inconsistencies within brands as to who they report to. And it's just it's a very like of all the rules that we see when working with brands, it's probably one of them that just like is done every possible way different. Like it has the most variety. So I'd say that's like the high level beginning of the workflow. But curious your thoughts on this, Jon, what you've seen work, what you've seen be problematic, and maybe some tips and tricks to try and optimize the workflow.
Yeah, I think that at the beginning, and this needs to evolve over time, but I think also a discussion needs to be had about what's the time horizon, and specifically meaning like how far out do we need to formulate a demand plan? Like how far out are we purchasing for? And then what is the frequency with which we redo this analysis? Totally different for every brand. A lot of this is governed by the time horizon that is dictated by your manufacturing lead times, your inbound freight transit lead times, and how much time you have to pay your suppliers. So if you think about the full, I think I should know this. I'm a finance guy. I don't talk like this, but like the fancy word is the procure to pay cycle. The procure to pay cycle is like when you cut the order to when the bill actually gets paid. you need to kind of like start with, hey, this is when the order needs to be placed based on the product getting here on time. And then this is the day when we expect to pay for this order. Whatever that duration is, that probably needs to be your planning time horizon for this. At Guardian Bikes, ours was about 90 days. Some brands, it's longer, 120, 150, 180 days. If you're blessed by the Lord above, it's shorter. That's because it makes things a lot easier. The reason why this matters so much, this actually plays into the step that Dylan was just mentioning about like risk assessment, is that the longer that planning horizon, actually, generally speaking, the riskier the decision is, because you're locking in orders for a longer time period. You can actually, kind of similar to like, we always talk about this kind of dichotomy of like high LTV brands being less risky than new customer dominant brands. Low lead time brands are less risky than long lead time brands, because you can afford to be wrong on a 30-day order and just adjust up or down on your next 30-day order. I'll give you an extreme example. During COVID, bike lead times went from 90 days to 365 days to 12 months. Now all of a sudden we are freaking forecasting 12 months of demand, which was like in a period of time when like we didn't know what we were going to sell in the next 12 months. And we also didn't know what our input costs were going to be, because input costs were changing so rapidly. And so there was a lot of risk that actually there's a ton of brands during COVID who placed orders based on a 12-month time horizon. And by the time they got that inventory, they were stuck with a bunch of overstocked inventory positions. They took on a lot of risk, and then demand ended up falling off a cliff post-COVID. So that just kind of explains that on the front end, you need to have an honest conversation with your team cross-functionally, marketing team, ops team, and finance. What's our planning time horizon? Why? And then how frequently are we going to refresh our inventory planning analysis and cycle? And ultimately, how frequently are we going to cut POs?
Yeah, 100%. I'd say like to make it simple, marketing creates the demand plan, how much of each SKU or variant we expect to run through. That then goes to finance. Finance essentially approves the cash commitments in making those POs. And then maybe there's some conversation between the two to make sure there's, it's if there has to be adjustments made, adjustments get made. And then in some cases, the ops team member would then go and actually facilitate placing and managing those POs and negotiating, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I'd say that from a workflow standpoint, that's kind of the thing that we most commonly see structured and structured well. From your, do you have any like tips or tricks, Jon, when it comes to things to avoid? Like I've seen brands do it this way, and that's just gone wrong almost every time.
I think the biggest and most frequent issue that we see is brands not consulting the marketing team on the SKU level demand forecast. And like, look, I have become further and further convinced, just like you, that the marketing team should own that fully. But at the very least, if someone else owns it, you need their sign off, or at least give them visibility into it. Because if they're selling based on their own assumptions of what the available stock is going to be, and that's wrong, there's just going to be mass inefficiency in your P&L and balance sheet by the disjointed nature of what the growth marketing team is trying to sell versus what the supply situation is. So I'd say that's probably the most common issue I see. I would say probably the second most common issue that I see is just forecasting SKU level demand only based on historical data, and exclusively based on historical data. Or it's actually, sorry, it's two different cases with not a lot of in between. Either specifically going off of a very optimistic forecast that's not pressure tested and grounded in data at all, or only looking at historical data and not thinking through and projecting what is going to change on the projection. And so I've talked before in previous episodes about thinking about two layers of demand. Think about what I call the momentum forecast. The momentum forecast is the historical data-driven trend. So what would it look like if you forecasted just a layer of demand that is the historical data forecasted forward? Then the intervention forecast is another layer on top of that either adds or subtracts to the momentum forecast based on other information that the company has and other efforts, interventions that the company is going to engage in the future that we expect to either push the momentum forecast up or push the momentum forecast down.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. What historical sell-through you take for the forecast, assuming that it's a top-down forecast of the revenue, you have to have some reference point for how you're deciding the percentage makeup of orders by SKU to actually get to that revenue. And most forecasts for inventory traditionally are top-down, unless it's simple replenishment ordering. So on the demand planning side, I completely agree. Well, I think in some cases, and it's partially because again, inventory is messy and it's not the most fun thing to track. I think that many brands struggle with ordering the wrong amount or the wrong thing. It's never going to be perfect. But I think the thing that gets talked about the least is like SKU level objectives. So one thing that we've realized more and more is that when, as the marketing agency, we have our suggestions to brands as to how they should inform us as to what their objectives are. Traditionally, it looks like growth rate, profitability, and the balance between those two things, because sometimes they're correlated, sometimes they're not. It depends on the health of the business. What I think gets missed is that if you can, if it's organizationally possible, even having SKU level objectives based off of inventory, I think matters a ton. One thing that irritates me a lot, if I've about opportunity cost, is it pains me if I sell out of something and I don't have the restock coming for like 4, 5, 6 weeks. Because in that scenario, if I was running ads for it, I either should have adjusted my efficiency targets or stopped running ads for it if cash flow permitted, because I'd rather sell through it on the lower cost channels like email or something. So that's an example where like it's not necessarily inventory planning for how much to buy, but it's inventory planning for how much to sell. And I think that actually gets missed a ton. I think there's like a ton of opportunity cost in almost every single D2C brand that has a meaningful number of SKUs because that objective is not in place. On the flip side, overstock, you have to think of it when you're structuring your workflows with your marketing agencies, you want to have a system in place to identify this SKU is selling too fast. I want to sell it more efficiently because I may as well if I'm going to run out. Or this SKU is selling too slow. I know my store-wide target is, I don't know, 20% contribution margin, 25% contribution margin, but I want for this SKU to actually, I'm cool if it moves at 0 because it's so unproductive on my balance sheet at this point. Let's move it. And we have our software tool, Alan, that helps automate a lot of these processes. But even if you're not going to implement software to help make it easier, maybe you have a smaller SKU count store, just giving your marketing agency like maybe a weekly update or a monthly update of saying, hey, this is these are the SKUs that I'm going to sell out of most, and they're not going to get restocked very soon. These are the SKUs I have way too much of. Just getting that information on a recurring basis. It's not as valuable for some high LTV brands or low SKU count stores, but if you have a lot of SKUs, that workflow I think can help both the P&L and cash flow a lot. So it's something we're actively working on trying to make as smooth as possible. And I think it's an opportunity that a lot of brands can go and pursue on the inventory planning side.
Yeah, one thing that I was just writing down as you were talking, when you were talking about SKU level objective, and this may be kind of taking a little bit of a left turn on what you meant here, but like your SKU catalog is a portfolio of investments. You, as an investor, you always have a thesis of why you're placing a bet on any given investment, right? So on the front end, when you go launch a new SKU, you need to have a thesis about what objective that SKU is going to serve. Some of the things we've talked about on this pod, one, is this going to be an acquisition SKU? Is this going to be a retention SKU? Is this a SKU that's going to raise my AOV by 10%? Or more importantly, my gross margin dollars per order by 10%, right? And I don't think enough brands think through that. And here's what it's not. Here's what I'm not saying. I'm not saying that you should have a SKU level objective that you forecast and predict to the T that like launching this product will increase my gross margin dollars per order by $4. But you shouldn't launch that product if you haven't strategically said, I'm launching this product to drive this particular financial outcome in the business. You can be wrong and still choose to keep that SKU in your portfolio, but you need to be able to say, hey, I was right or I was wrong. And here's what I actually think is going on. and then decide if you keep selling it or not. And I guess the point that I'm making is that I think it's that thesis that you make on the front end when you develop product and launch it should carry through to your demand, like to your inventory planning strategy. And it should further advance the achievement of whatever that hypothesis is. And if it's not, you should sit back and reflect with your investment hat on and say, should we keep doing this way or not? Does that make sense? Do you agree?
I 100% agree. I think that, like, in a way, every single inventory PO you make, you have to have a thesis, and you have to have, like, maybe you're not trying to forecast this to a T, but you're having some expected return on invested capital.
Totally.
Like that's the financial metric that you're effectively pursuing when you buy inventory. And this comes back down to having like acquisition SKUs, retention SKUs, new category bets. Like, I think that for net new products, thinking about it that way makes a ton of sense. Do you
Like,
have,
I want to give an example really fast because I'm in the middle of this with my real estate portfolio. You know, like I love a great real estate analogy. I have 18 doors that I've acquired over the last couple years. Every single one of those, I had a thesis of like, hey, I believe based on all the analysis I've done, I'm going to get this cash on cash return. I'm going to get this fully loaded IRR over the first 5 years. And it's going to generate these kind of like 3 to 5 bullet points. And I actually write out a brief strategy statement. And I say, I believe this property is going to do this. Here's the things I'm going to do to make this happen. And I've got a property that I bought almost 2 years ago, and it's just not doing the things that I said it was going to do. It's performing okay. It's not like losing money. It's performing okay. But I'm looking at the pipeline of other possible investments where I could allocate that capital. I'm like, I'm going to sell this thing, talking to an agent about listing it. I'm going to sell this thing. I'm going to take that capital, do a 1031 exchange, tax deferred exchange, and I'm going to roll it into one of these other ones that I'm looking at making some offers on. Your SKU portfolio is legitimately the exact same thing as that. I'm like, it's not any different than that. But you need to like learn to be able to think of it in that manner. Do I have like the perfect spreadsheet that projects that this decision is going to do what I say it's going to do? I have a projection, but I don't have a prediction, right? Yeah. But it didn't meet it. The thesis did not turn out to be as true as I wanted it to. And I think I've got some other options that will actually drive forward that thesis. And so I'm going to reallocate the capital.
I think that's 100% the way to think about it on SKUs as well. Like, and it also comes down to like, I think we've talked about this before, but there's even scenarios where it makes sense to move through units at a loss if you recoup the cash and can more quickly invest that into a thing that has the ability to make excess gains, so the net outcome is better. Like, it's okay to have losers, and I think sometimes people sit with stuff on their balance sheet stubbornly because they want to turn a profit on it, not thinking about the time value of money. And what could be if you had, even 80 cents on the dollar into something that could go and make you, I don't know, 130 cents on the dollar or something like that. So yeah, definitely agree with that framework for thinking about it. Do you have any final takes, Jon, on how to most effectively inventory plan?
This is going to probably sound like not super novel, but like I want everyone to listen closely because it's true. A lot of this is more about communication and alignment than it is about data science. And like, I know you're going to be like, people are going to be like, what? From the finance guy? It's way more about communication and continuous communication, because every bet, 100% of the inventory planning bets you're going to place are going to be wrong. In what direction and how far they're going to be, or how far off they're going to be, I don't know, but I guarantee 100% of them are going to be wrong. And so it's not a set it and forget it. It's figuring out your time horizon, figuring out the frequency, figuring out the people that need to be at the table across your functions to execute on this workflow, and to continuously revisit it and adjust and refine. And if you do it, like the very first ever cross-functional planning meeting we had at Guardian Bikes, which was our cadence, it was clunky and we didn't place very good bets. We didn't make very good decisions. 2 years into that cadence, we were a well-oiled machine, placing better bets, not perfect bets, better bets, and just much more in tune with what was going on in marketing, ops, and finance. and it just made everything better. So it's about communication and alignment much more than it's about data science. What's your final take, Dylan?
My final take would be I agree on the communications piece, and then it's about formalizing the processes to actually facilitate that information dialogue between the various parties. Like communication is great, but you can't actually have effective communication if you don't have an effective process for creating the forecast in the plate in the first place, or tracking how much inventory you actually have or have in transit in like a consistent way that people can reference and get the information. So I think that again, like what for some brands, they've experienced the pain of poor inventory planning. I think for most brands, there's a ton of opportunity cost in not having inventory level objectives shared with your marketing team. I think that establishing the workflows in your brand, that's like a really easy, low hanging fruit way to make more profit and cash flow. And thinking about how do you get that information to them in an effective, efficient way is like the easiest implementation. So that's my closing thought for today. I hope everyone enjoyed talking about inventory with us. But I think that's it, Jon.
Yep, another one on the books. Let's go.